This episode is brought to you by Cantiani Insurance Agency, insurance professionals specializing in home, auto, flood, and investment properties. They are the most referred insurance agency in Massachusetts. If you want coverage you can trust, call 508-791-2088 or visit cantianiagency.com. We also welcome a new sponsor, Wizard Computer Services, providing outsourced IT and cybersecurity since 1997. Call 781-341-2222 or visit www.wizardcpu.com for more information. New England's cybersecurity experts. All right, big time guest on today's podcast. Hall of Fame quarterback, Super Bowl MVP and champion, quarterback for the greatest show on turf, Kurt Warner. Kurt, thanks for joining.
You got it. Good to be on.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you. I mean, obviously, one of the things that sticks out and is no secret really is your story and how incredible it is. So I want to take it all the way back to start and just kind of get a background here. Is it true that you didn't start playing quarterback until high school?
It is true. Yes. Not until I was a wide receiver up until that point. Pretty good wide receiver. So when I got shifted to quarterback when I was a freshman in high school, I didn't want to have any part of it. I'd never played it before, didn't know a lot about it. I actually had a coach in high school that we had nobody try out for quarterback when I went out as a freshman. So he basically lined us up on a line and wanted to see who could throw it the farthest. And so I ended up throwing it the farthest. So I was deemed the quarterback. And as much as I didn't like it, obviously it was, it was tremendous insight by him to move me to that position. And obviously it's worked out really well, even though it's been a long journey. So grateful that I play quarterback. I love the position. I love everything about it. But that is 100% true. Didn't want to play it, hadn't played it until freshman in high school and was forced into that position at that point.
Incredible. And then shifting towards college, you and I, correct? So there it's you're the backup for 3 years?
For 4 years, actually. So I redshirted my freshman year, and then I was a backup for 3 years there. Unlike college football now, uh, at that point in time, it was, you kind of get recruited, and then once you get recruited, you're kind of slotted in to play whenever your kind of time comes. It wasn't always just a, open competition for a young guy against an old guy. Sometimes it was, hey, this guy has been our starter, or this guy's a senior, he's going to get the start, and then you have to work your way up from there. And so, unfortunately, the guy that had become a starter was a year older than me, and so every year I tried to unseat him and take his job. But for whatever reason, and I think there were a lot of reasons, he held me off. Some were my doing, some were probably his doing, but he held me off for those basically 3 years that I had a chance to play, and so I wouldn't become a starter until my senior year.
Can you talk a little bit about like preparation or how you handled being the backup? Because like once you got your opportunity, you were offensive player of the year, first team all conference. It's hard. I know in college when I didn't play as a freshman, like going from being the guy to sitting for 4 years. What did you do during that time that you think helped you once you did get your opportunity to then be the guy?
Well, I mean, I tried to do everything I knew to do up to that point, whether it was, the way I put in work, gained weight, the way I was, attacking the spring, the way that I thought I was going about things on an everyday basis, and specifically to get ready for the moments when I would play, whether that was the big spring game that we would have, every spring after spring ball. But it was, I was trying to do everything I knew at that time. And, probably the greatest lesson I ever learned was during that time as well, because I felt like I was the most talented guy in that room. Just from a physical standpoint, I felt I was the best player that was there. And I think a lot of my teammates felt the same thing from a physical standpoint. And I really couldn't figure out why I couldn't get on the football field. It had to be, deeper than just, okay, he's a year older than me. We had success. The guy that was in front of me, wasn't necessarily a great quarterback, but didn't make mistakes. We won a lot as a team, but I couldn't figure it out. In spring games, I thought I was outperforming him. And as I said, my teammates felt like I was more talented. And I had a friend on the team that was a little bit older, knew the coaches a little bit better. That at one point in my career, I asked him if he would go up and just talk to the coaches on my behalf, feeling like they might be a little bit more honest with him and give me some feedback to why I wasn't playing. And when he came back, to the locker room, I was in there by myself, just kind of waiting for this to play out. And he came back in and he told me, okay, the reason the coaches told me you're not playing is because you're not very good in practice. And you guys are probably a little bit young, but all I could think back to was, to Allen Iverson a number of years ago when he was just talking about like practice. Are we talking
Talking
about
about
practice? Like, we're
practice.
not talking about the finals. We're not talking about the playoffs. We're talking about practice. And it's exactly how I felt. Like, are you serious? Like, practice, what it's all about, being under the lights and in the big
Yeah.
moments. And, when the pressure's on, can you perform in those moments? That's what I always felt, this position and really, being great at anything was about those moments. And so I went back and I was frustrated and I was kind of mad and I felt like it was just an excuse, for whatever reason. But I got to thinking about it and the more you think about it, in high school we played 9 games in a season. In college we played 11, 12 games. In the NFL I played 16 games in a season. And so when you start to put it in that perspective, you start to realize about 95% of your life is lived in practice. It's not under the lights, it's not in those big moments, but it's in practice. And what the coaches were trying to tell me was, yeah, you've been good in the spring games or when you've gotten a few opportunities to play. The problem is we don't see that same guy every day. And we don't see you practicing like we saw you in the spring game. So we're a little bit confused on who you are and what you're going to be. If we were going to put the ball in your hands, are you going to be the guy we saw on Monday or Tuesday or when? Like, we're not really sure because you don't show up and practice the same way every day. And on the surface, it seems like, okay, Kurt was a terrible practice player, and he needed to be. That wasn't the case. I wasn't a terrible practice player. I wasn't a guy that, didn't get locked in and try to practice well and work hard in practice. It wasn't that. It just, I wasn't consistent enough in that sort of stuff. And so he was just saying, hey, if your teammates are going to trust you and believe in you on a Saturday afternoon when the game is on the line, they need to see who you're going to be every day. And the same with us as coaches. And so where I didn't think it was that big of a deal, where I was still more focused on being under the lights, it kind of reshaped how I looked at things and how I looked at being a leader and how I looked at, this position of quarterback in a game where you only have so many games in a year and every game's important. That if a team's going to trust you with the ball in your hands, for those 9, 12, 16 games, they need to know what they're going to get. They need to understand what kind of leader and what kind of player you're going to be. And so as tough as it was to be sitting on the bench, it was probably the greatest lesson that I learned is that, what kind of practice player are you? How do you show up every day? And, it obviously applies on the football field, but it's also become something that for me, my wife wants to know what kind of practice player you're going to be. Like, not just what are you going to get me on our anniversary? Or are you going to remember my birthday? She wants to know, what are you going to do every day? And I've got 7 kids. And I've realized the same thing. I kind of thought, well, as long as I show up for their games on Friday nights or I'm there for prom or whatever that is, that's the most important stuff. And my kids are the same way. They're like, Dad, we just want to know you're going to be here every day. Whether we get an A or a D, we have a good game or a bad game. We just want to know what kind of practice player are you? How are you going to show up and love me every single day? So it really became a valuable lesson for me on how I look at life. And I want what you see today to be the same thing you see tomorrow, to be the same thing you see under the lights, to be the same things you see or you don't see because, when nobody's watching. I want to be the same guy at all times. And it was through that period of college that really, that message just really resonated with who I wanted to be and what I wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's great for kids to hear. We talk to our kids all the time about like no detail is too small. And like every day for us, every day they step on the turf with us is an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to get better and you don't get this day back. And I think like you said, like the preparation, that's what ultimately leads to the success is what you're doing every day and how you handle yourself every day. And you got that opportunity in college because you did have to, be the backup. And I think sometimes today with the way that the college football landscape is now, kids miss that opportunity or they just can go to their next next school or next opportunity. So I think that there is a ton of value in that. When you did get your opportunity, you finally get to play, you've prepared for this moment. Like at that point, were you thinking NFL aspirations? Like, was that your goal all along, or did this just come about after having a really good year and then you're looking at the
No,
next steps?
yeah, that was always the goal. And even after I sat on the bench, and there was obviously times when I was sitting on the bench going, okay, how's this going to work? How am I going to play in the NFL if I can't even get on the field in college? But again, you hold on to little stories that you hear, and I remember, and it was somewhere around the same time where Brad Johnson, I think, was a backup his entire career in college, and then he ended up playing and playing in the NFL and getting that opportunity. So whatever it was, when that was my dream, it was always like, I'm gonna find a way. Like even though there was times that you get challenged and a little doubt can creep in, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna play 1 year and I'm gonna play really well and somebody will give me a shot. So that was always my mindset. There was never a time where I thought, oh, this is over, this is done, it can't happen this way. It wasn't the way that I wanted it to, but it was always the dream from the time I was very young. It was a dream throughout college. And it really just became okay. When you're growing up, you have, the plan that you set out. Like, this is a path. This is how it's going to work. I'm going to do this in high school and I'm going to get a scholarship and I'm going to play 4 years in college and then I'm going to get drafted and then I'm going to have a Hall of Fame career. And you have it laid out. And then along the way, sometimes you got to take a little bit of a turn to the left and then a turn to the right. And so that was all I was doing. Was the dream and the end goal never changed. It was just, oh, okay, this part of it, yeah, change this step. Okay, so now how do I get back to where I want to be? And that was just always my mindset. What is it going to take? When you're a junior sitting on the bench, it's just like, okay, if the starter can't play for a game or he struggles, okay, I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to hit the ground running, and then maybe I can win the job, and then I get a year and a half, and then when you take over as a senior, that was my mindset: is okay, got to have a great year. You got to have a top notch year in hopes that somebody sees enough that they give you an opportunity in camp, and then if they do that, you're right back to where you would be, on that
On
ladder
your
or on that path by, hey, here's the opportunity. So that was just kind of always my mindset of, how do I work through where I'm at right now to get back on track to be able to accomplish that dream that I set out, to accomplish so many years before that.
Yeah. And then you are undrafted, right? But you do get that opportunity with Green Bay, and your experience there is no short of incredible too, with Brett Favre and Brunell and Detmer. And can you just kind of take us through that and what you saw from them? And then I know Andy Reid was like a small time offensive assistant and
Yeah.
what he became and all that. So what was that experience like?
I mean, it was actually an incredible experience for me, even though I never played in a game. I didn't get a lot of reps. Never really got a chance to make the team. A lot of people will ask, "Well, why did you choose Green Bay with those three guys? A Heisman Trophy winner, and then two guys. One would go on to be an All Pro, and one would go on to be a Hall of Famer. Why would you choose camp there?" Well, the thing was, is I knew they had three good quarterbacks, but they only invited me as a fourth quarterback to camp. So there wasn't some of the other places I had a chance to go. They were going to invite a fifth and maybe even a sixth quarterback. And so I just kind of said, okay, let's go to the place that has four, and you got to beat somebody out, right? I mean, that's the nature of this business. Like, nobody's handing you a job, unless you're a really high pick. And so I knew I was going to have to beat somebody out anyways. Why not go someplace and see if I can beat one person out? Or, maybe when somebody gets traded, or maybe, unfortunately somebody suffers an injury and I get a chance to make it on the practice squad for a year. And so, that was why I chose Green Bay. Now, it didn't end up working out that way, but, one of the coolest things was knowing who those three quarterbacks were. Like, when you show up to camp, you're like, okay, that guy won the Heisman Trophy. This guy was really good at Washington, and we know what he would become. And then Brett Favre being the starter, and you could see very quickly when you were around him how physically talented and gifted he was. So the beautiful thing is I got to throw against those guys every single day. I got to line up and do the same drills, make the same throws. And so I gained so much confidence playing next to those guys every day, because, it doesn't matter how confident we are, how much we believe in ourselves. I'm a firm believer that you have to convince yourself every time you take a step up, high school to college, college to pros. You've got to convince yourself that you belong. right? Yes, we want to convince everybody else that I belong and I should be a starter. But the first thing you have to do is truly convince yourself you belong here. You're good enough to be here. And that's what that time in Green Bay did for me was I left Green Bay so much more confident than I was when I got there, because I had played the 1 year in college and smaller school, like everybody else had doubts. I was confident, but you still have doubts. You're like, I don't know. I mean, I haven't played against these guys. I don't, I think I'm good enough, but I'm not sure. So I left there so confident going, oh man, I I am physically talented enough to play at this level. There is no doubt in my mind, given the right opportunity, I can play because of my time there. And again, it's funny how these paths work and how they play out. Obviously, in my mind, I wanted to make the team there and think, okay, I'm going to make the team and then I'll work my way up and become a starter. Yeah, I joke with people all the time because I was in camp with Green Bay in 1994 and I ended up retiring in 2009. Favre did not miss a single start in the National Football League from 1994 to 2009.
It's
Th
crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, that entire time, he did not miss a single start. So I look back now and go, "Man, even if I'd have made it with Green Bay," and I know, like, a Matt Hasselbeck or an Aaron Brooks, were backups there and would ultimately become starters somewhere else. But, when I looked at it, it was like, "Wow," I'd have been a backup for a number of years, probably played a little bit in preseason, and who knows what would happen. Instead, I get cut, and, yeah, I mean, I gotta work in the grocery store and stuff, but I played 3 years in arena football. I play in Europe. I played more football than any backup quarterback in the history of time over those 4 years. So where I had played 1 year in college, so I had 1 year experience in college, to where I would have been a backup and got to play very sparingly, I got all this experience. I know it was on a different level, and I know it wasn't something that people were looking for me or, recognizing what I was doing. What I knew is I was playing and I was getting better and I was experiencing different opportunities and different situations and growing as a football player. So when I would get my opportunity in 99 to get back into the NFL, I was so ready. Like I had played so much football. I was so seasoned as a player and so confident as a player because of where I'd been and what I had done, um, that it's just funny. You look back and I'm like, man, I didn't want the story to be the story that it is. I didn't necessarily want the journey, but I'm so grateful for that preparation time. So when I did get my shot in 99, man, I could hit the ground running. It wasn't, I didn't need time to figure out how to play football or, to experience some of the situations that I never got in college. I was so ready to play, and it's a big reason why I feel that, when I did get the chance to start in 99, man, I took off because I had been playing a lot of football. I was ready for this, and now, yeah, it's a higher level, but I'm just doing what I've been doing, for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, you had the flight hours. Talk to us about the arena game because obviously it's different. How did it prepare you? Were there benefits to that game that you think helped you when you got back into the NFL?
I mean, there's no doubt. Oh, there's a lot of people that ask me that, and to me, it comes back. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? So did I have certain skill sets? The ability to process fast, the accuracy, those types of things, or were those things that were just defined and honed playing arena football because the game was faster and the windows were tighter and the field was smaller? I don't know the answer to that. But regardless of what it was, there's no doubt that that game helped to hone those skills for sure. And the things that I would become known for in the NFL were all things that I had to do week in and week out, year in and year out in arena football. But the other factor was that in arena football, it's all about the quarterback. Like, it's pass first, it's pass always. Like, we ran the ball 4 times in a game. That was a lot. And so you were counted on as a quarterback to perform and to score every time you touched it. And so just that mentality, there's never going to be a time where I'm going to lean on my defense. Leaning on your defense is giving up 60 points in a game. Leaning on your run game is they hand it to them on the 1 yard line and hope that they can score a touchdown instead of you throwing it in. Like that's what you did. And so just that part of it too was just that constant pressure to have to play and have to throw and have to make good decision after good decision and have to score. to me was invaluable. When I got to the Rams that first year, and I don't know, we were scoring 35 points a game or whatever it was. I remember, people coming up to me and just being like, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this. This is like a video game. And, all the articles all week long and whatever. I remember going in the locker room going, "Why are we punting twice, guys? Like, what is our problem? Like, what? Yeah, why? Yeah, we shouldn't be punting." And it was just my mentality that I expected to score every time I touched the football. So it led itself to obviously being great at the NFL level because obviously that's not the case. But that was just my mindset, and so even that mindset in and of itself, I think pushed me and held me to a certain standard no matter where I was, no matter where I was playing, no matter, even that I was in the NFL, this is how I played football. So that time in arena football, I think shaped a lot of things in me that helped me to learn to play a certain way, to have a short memory, in arena football, like again, you throw an interception, the next drive, they're not handing the football off three times and kicking, the ball's back in your hands. Now you got to go get a touchdown. Like one turnover could cost us the game. So there were just so many scenarios in arena football that I'm so grateful for, that I think really helped to hone my skills or teach me skills or put me in situations that I never had otherwise. And it would be things that would prepare me and help catapult me when I got to the NFL.
Now,
Yeah,
when
it's
you first of all, incredible. It's just like obviously a well documented story. You had the movie come out about you, which was really cool. And we'll get into that a little bit. But 3 years in arena, like, are you thinking you do well your first year, you don't get the call, you do well your second year, you don't like, were you still thinking I'm gonna make it back to the NFL? Like that was your goal. You had
Yeah.
firm belief that that was going to be the path. Cause I know like we have guys that have played arena for multiple years and nothing comes of it. Like, were
Yeah.
you always of the mindset, like, I'm going to get back to the NFL, or was there a point where you were
Yeah.
kind of questioning
I mean,
everything?
again, it was always the mindset, just like we had talked about in college is like, okay, this is, I got to take a little bit of a detour and play arena football. I didn't want to play arena football. I didn't know anything about arena football when I went there, but I wanted to play. And I felt like if I'm playing, at least I have an opportunity to be seen, working in a grocery store or working out at my college, on my college field, hoping that, somebody sees me or like playing was always going to be the best opportunity, to get seen. And then, yeah, I mean, when I went to arena football and, had so much success and kind of the top quarterback and we went to the championship, kind of think the same thing. Like, okay, I'm playing really well somewhere in here, there's going to be an opportunity. And, the other thing about, the arena football, there would be a few guys along the way that would get opportunities, specifically quarterbacks. There were a number of coaches that were in the league that, whether it was Canada or the NFL, but, my coach, it was a coach that coached in Canada for a long time. So there was a lot of coaches that had been other places too and new people. And so you kind of thought, same thing. Hey, maybe they have contacts so somewhere that, they can say, hey, take a look at this guy. Maybe, maybe he's got a shot. But, as, 25 and then I was 26 and then I'm, 27 and that's when I started to go, here's when, a little bit of doubt crept in because it's like, how many teams are going to give a 27-year-old rookie quarterback an opportunity to play? Because at that time, it's a lot different than this time. This time, guys are playing well into their 30s, even 40. At that time, quarterbacks were retiring at 33, 34. So I'm sitting here kind of weighing this going, okay, if I'm already 27 and I haven't ever played in the NFL, and guys are retiring, 6, 7 years from now, how legitimate is it that somebody's going to give me an opportunity? So those doubts started to creep in, a little bit, just from that standpoint. It was never about was I good enough, could I play? I always felt like that was there, but it was just about is the time to get an opportunity running out? Or are they going to see some of these other factors as being, more important or detrimental enough that they're not going to take a shot? And those were the moments that I just like, oh my gosh, like I really think I'm good enough, after Green Bay and then playing in arena football and playing so well. It was just, and I would see some other guys like Cedric Bonner, you guys probably don't know him, but he was a quarterback for the Arizona team in arena football, and he was getting they were really good. He was getting a shot in the NFL a couple years in a row, and so with those things, it was kind of like, man, somebody just give me that shot, and I'll show them that I belong. But that was tough. As I was getting older, that's what really kind of entered my mind. Like, man, what's too old? Is there going to come a point where it's just you've hit the threshold and just it's over? Nobody's going to give you a chance. And just fortunate that somebody did, I guess, before I hit that.
Yeah, and we actually have a co-host of this podcast who's not here tonight, but he played for the Barnstormers last year,
We got you.
James
Okay.
Cahoon. Yeah, and then now he's actually he was gonna be on, but he's got a meeting, I think, for the he's on the Jacksonville Sharks now. So he's kinda at a
Okay.
similar, crossroads
Yep.
as you were then.
Yep.
I don't know how old Jimmy is, 25, 26, but he, he's had some real success there, but it's one of those things I think is how do you teach that level of patience and that level of conviction to just kinda keep going? Like, that's something that I guess with Green Bay, you said, like, you started to learn that, "Man, I can compete," but then it starts to waver as the years go by. That relentlessness kinda followed you your whole career, right? Just the ability to kinda keep going and trust in the process and wait your turn. What's some advice you might give
Yeah.
our guy James?
Well, I mean, I think it really stemmed from the fact that I was very confident in my ability. And so, because I always had that, and because that success had followed me. I think that was another key factor for me. You mentioned I played 1 year in college, but that 1 year I was really good. Then I played 3 years in arena football. And those 3 years I was really good. And then I would end up playing the 1 year in Europe, and I was really good. And so, you know, that was the thing that, when people, what kept you going? Or like, because I knew I was good. Like, nobody could ever show me a time where I had the ball in my hands where I wasn't good. And so that was my mindset. So now it was just give me an opportunity. Like, somebody's got to see this at some point and realize, it wasn't like I played 3 years in arena football and was bad for 2 years and then had a really good, like, I was always good when I played. And that's what just, kept me moving with, like, you just got to be ready, because especially as I got older, it was like, you're not going to get a lot of opportunities. Like, people aren't knocking down your door to give you an opportunity to try out. So if you can get one, you have to be ready. You're good enough, but you can't take that day off. You can't take a deep breath. You're not in a position to do that. And so that was kind of my mindset. You couple confidence with work ethic. When that one chance comes, those are going to intersect, and I am going to be ready for that opportunity. But I think it really did stem from the fact that, nobody could point to anything. Nobody could tell me that I wasn't good enough. A coach could, like, you couldn't show me, like, oh, what about that season? Or what about the 1 year you play? They didn't have that. And, it was probably a good thing for me because then you never know. Does doubt start to creep in? Because it was like, I mean, I thought I was good, but then I was the, sixth best quarterback in arena football. And then, but that wasn't the case. So holding that high standard, I think, always, had me, ready and prepared and confident that if it does come, I am not going to waste that opportunity. I've worked too hard to get there, and I believe too much that I belong. Now you just got to stay the course, and you just got to hope that that call comes or that not comes at some point in time.
What was it like when you
Wild.
finally did get that call? Like you had been playing arena for 3 years.
Yeah.
December 1997, the Rams come calling. What was that like for you emotionally? And then just talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, my journey is well documented, but along the way, certain things get left out. I talked a lot about it in my Hall of Fame speech, just kind of the people, because so much of this, you know, as much as I want to believe in what I can do and what I'm capable of and being ready, along the way, it takes people to give you an opportunity. Whether that was my high school coach that, forced me but gave me an opportunity to play quarterback, whether that was the one school, Northern Iowa, that gave me an opportunity to, to have a partial scholarship so I could go to college and play, whether it was the coach in arena football. And then from arena football, there was a coach named Al Luganville, who was actually coaching in NFL Europe in the Amsterdam team, the team that I would end up playing for. And in 1996, he reached out to me when I was playing arena football and said, "Hey, I've been watching you. I think you could really help us, with Amsterdam. Would you come play for us?" And I knew that if I was going to go back to the NFL, it was probably going to go through NFL Europe, where I would have to get back on the big field and show people that I could play at that level or with that size of field. But I remember telling him in 1996, "Hey, if you can get me a tryout with an NFL team, so I know that I'm going to just get another shot in camp. That's all I'm looking for is just a shot to compete. If you can do that, I will come play for you in Europe." But at the time, in arena football was a pretty good gig. I was making over 100 grand a year. I was able to take care of my family. In NFL Europe, you made like $1,000 a game for, whatever it was, 8 games, 10 games, so it was a huge difference. And so I was afraid to give up what I had in arena football, that even though it wasn't the NFL, I'm at least doing well enough to take care of my family, for NFL Europe. And so he went and called a bunch of teams and he called me back and he said, "Kurt, I have nobody that's interested in signing you." And so I told him no in 1996, that I'm just going to stay playing arena football. Amazingly enough, he called me back in 1997, even after I told him no. And he said, "Kurt, will you come play for us in Amsterdam?" And I made the same deal with him. I'm like, "If you go and get me signed with an NFL team, I am on the first plane out. But I just have to know I have that assurance and I have that one more thing." And so as the story goes, he went and called 12 different NFL teams and nobody was interested. And then we talked to the Rams, and I wouldn't know this until afterwards, but in NFL Europe at the time, what would happen is there would be certain NFL teams who had to, if they wanted to send their guys to NFL Europe, they would have to send them to certain teams in NFL Europe. So if the Rams were going to send somebody to NFL Europe, they were going to send them to the Amsterdam team because, Al Luginbill actually had an office in Rams Park in St. Louis where they would, they would go through that sort of stuff. So at the time, I thought, oh, the Rams want to give me a shot. What I really think happened was, as a favor to Al, because Al wanted me to play for him, he said, "Hey, will you guys bring him in for a tryout and maybe sign him to be your camp arm so he'll come play for us?" Either way, I didn't really care. I didn't care how it happened,
Yeah.
but I went and had the tryout. It was the worst tryout of my life. I had broken my thumb the last year in arena football, and I couldn't control the football like, I was kind of known for my accuracy, and I just didn't think I had a very good tryout. So I remember driving out of Rams Park, and I called my wife, and I told her, I said, "I just blew my last chance. Like, that was terrible. It was a terrible workout." But they called and they signed me to a contract. Again, I believe it's as a favor to Al. But they called, and so I'm like, "All right, great. I'm going to camp." I went over to NFL Europe. While I was there, Charlie Army, who was the general manager of the Rams, just he watched me and he became a fan of what I could do and really felt like I was good enough. So I got him in my corner. And so when I came back to the Rams in 97 to compete for that third spot, they had seen me play, had seen me play in Europe. He went to bat for me. And that ultimately would, seal my spot as the number 3 in 97 or in 98 before taking over in 99.
It's incredible. And then with the expansion though, with like they didn't protect you, is that right? In terms of like the
Yeah, yeah,
draft?
that Browns were an expansion team at the time. And so, every team had to, I guess, leave 4 or 5 guys unprotected. And I mean, no surprise. Like, people say
Yeah.
that all the time to me. And it was like, why would you protect me? Nobody knows anything about me. The Browns aren't going to grab me as a quarterback, I wouldn't think. But yeah, they left me unprotected. So the Browns had the opportunity, but obviously I was fortunate and I was glad I didn't, think I would get picked up. But yes, I was left unprotected for that expansion draft.
And then look like fast forward a couple of years, everybody, or especially here because we're in New England, the whole Bledsoe Brady deal, right? And
Yes.
then
Yeah.
prior to that, though, is the Trent Green, Kurt Warner deal, right? Where one of those just major seizing the moment opportunities for you. He goes down, right? And then and you get the call, and all of a sudden you're playing on that team. What was that like for you? I know you always said you were confident, but like, does
Yeah.
anything prepare you for that?
I mean, it was a perfect storm first and foremost from a lot of different standpoints. Obviously, we were extremely talented. I was surrounded by, a bunch of Hall of Famers or guys that would be Hall of Famers. Mike Martz was kind of the evil genius, just in terms of, we were going to play football different than anybody had ever played football before. And we were going to throw first. But that was, I mean, we just talked about what my mindset was in arena football. So that couldn't have been a better fit just in terms of mindset and how we wanted to play, and how Mike called a game, and how he was always looking to attack and score on every play. Like, it couldn't have been a better fit from that standpoint either. And then the third, when you were asking me about, how I felt, and being confident, you guys probably know that I'm a man of faith. And so, one of my favorite stories in the Bible is David and Goliath. And, obviously the underdog, all that stuff you can understand. But there's a sequence in that story where, David shows up on the battlefield and says, yeah, I'll fight Goliath. And King Saul kind of looks at this little shepherd boy and kind of like, okay, what is it about you? Why do you think, I got all these trained warriors. Why do you think that you could be successful? And he looks back at, King David and said, hey, from the time I've been however big, my job has been to be a shepherd to my flock. And there have been numerous times over the years when a bear has tried to attack my flock, and I've defended my flock from the bear. And there's been a lion, and I've defended my flock from the lion. And, there's been wolves, and and so he basically was saying, hey, every time, just kind of like I was telling you guys, every time I had the ball in my hands, every time I had to defend my flock from something, I defended them. And so, yeah, Goliath is maybe a little bit bigger than the lion, and it's a little bigger situation, but this is what I do. I believe in myself. I'm confident in myself. Obviously, there was a faith component that he believed that God had a purpose for him, but I very much felt the same way as I was going through this journey. So yes, this is a bigger animal, a bigger stage, more at stake, but this is what I do. This is what I've always done. And so, being inserted into that situation, it wasn't as if I thought, I don't know if I can play. I don't know if I'll be successful. I believed I was going to play really, really well. I believed I was going to have success because it's all I knew. And I was just happy to have that opportunity. And so, yeah, there was a little anxiety. I knew I wasn't going to get a long leash, right? I knew a lot of people didn't know a lot about me. So I was going to have to prove something very quickly. But there was no doubt and no hesitation that I could play really well because of what I believed about myself, because of the preparation that I had been through. Like I told you guys, I played more football over those 4 years than probably anybody, even starters in a lot of leagues. I'd played a lot of football. I was ready for that, surrounded by great talent in a situation that fit me perfectly. This couldn't be set up. Like, if I can't succeed here, then I'm not good enough. Like, that's all it is. But believing I was good enough, it's like, hey, this is set up for me to have a chance to be right where I wanted to be. We talked about the path that you laid out. I tell people all the time, like, when I was 8 or 9 years old, dreaming of playing in the NFL, if somebody had come to me and said, okay, Kurt, by the time you're 28, you'll have won an MVP, you'll have won a Super Bowl, and you'll be a Super Bowl MVP. Will you take it? Hands down. It'd be like, yep, I'm in. Take it. Give it to me. And so,
Yeah.
as crazy as it was, everything went into fast forward when I finally got into the NFL, and it was a crazy journey to get there. But here I am, 28 years old, and I've got the world by the tail in terms of the football field and the NFL, and what I had accomplished. And now it was hit the ground running, and see how far you can take this.
If you're a player, coach, or parent trying to learn more about football, the quarterback position, navigate recruiting, or determine the landscape of both college and high school football, we got the podcast for you. But before we get going, quick shout out to our sponsors over at Lowney Sports. I've known Tim personally, and he's been a longtime supporter of both youth and high school athletes. He's also an attorney of over 25 years and both an NFL and NIL agent. Many think NIL is expensive, unnecessary, or that it only matters once you have an offer. But there's a lot more to know before the scholarships and deals start coming. To contact Tim for a free NIL consultation, call 617-733-8313 or visit lowneysports.com.
M2QB Academy is also a Wilson brand affiliate. When you're buying Wilson merchandise, go to the website, click checkout, and plug in our promo code M2QB-456 and save some money with your purchase.
Yeah. And I think that, like, one of the things I've heard you talk about in your analysis of other players, I think I heard you speak about Mendoza too. It's like a lot of talent, all the tools. I haven't seen him like fully carry a team through a game. And then you talked about the arena game, how like that's on your shoulders. And then you go to the Rams with Martz calling the offense, where you're kind of carrying the game, but then you also have Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and Marshall
Yeah.
Faulk. And so there was just an incredible blend of all these things that you've seen coming together at
Mm.
once. And then
Yep.
obviously you have a historic year, right? Your first game over 300 yards, I think. And then moving forward, I'm a Titans fan.
Okay.
So you guys lose to the Titans in the regular season. Steve
Yeah.
McNair, I grew up in New England. I went through the whole Tom Brady thing not being a Patriots fan, and it was all because Steve McNair. He was the only person I ever wanted to watch. So I became the Titans fan, and then the longest yard and all this stuff happens. So going through that, like you lose to the Titans in the regular season. You come back, they're your first loss. You come back in the Super Bowl. Did that loss help you guys in the Super Bowl, help you prepare, or help you feel like, man, we probably should have got him in the regular season. We can go get him right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it just that, it was our first loss and, we came down to the end. We missed a kick at the end that would have tied the game. So yeah, I mean, I think there's part of you that if you played somebody and you're close, you feel like, hey, we let that one slip away. We didn't play our best game. But I think more than anything, like that game, we fell way behind in that game. And then we came all the way back and had a chance to win it. And then we would play Detroit the next week. Same thing. We would be ahead and then we'd lose the lead at the end. And then I was able to bring the team down the field, and we scored to go ahead with just a couple minutes to go, and then they completed a 4th and 26 that would ultimately help them win the game. But those two losses, I think, shaped us a lot as a football team because up until that point, like we were beating everybody by 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, putting up all these points, and that was the first time we had faced some adversity. Like, okay, we didn't play our best game. We made some mistakes early, but the team had fought back and the team had showed some resiliency. We had seen some of the character of our team come out. And I think that was what we learned mostly from those two games. Not, I'm sure we took something from the fact that we were close with the Titans and we could play with them. But by the time we got to the Super Bowl, I think we knew what kind of team we were. So we weren't afraid of anybody at that point. It wasn't really looking at the Titans. It was just go play your game. But I think the thing we had learned about our team was that we weren't just front runners. We weren't just a team that, if we scored a bunch of points and got up on everybody, we could be successful. We could also fight. And we had guys that, had that heart to them that, hey, as this thing goes, we believe we can win and play with anybody. We believe we can win any kind of game. We believe if, even if things go against us at some point, we can fight our way back and find a way to finish and win. And I think that was the greatest lesson we learned from those two losses and specifically that loss to the Titans earlier in the year.
Yeah, and watching the Super Bowl too, one of the things that is cool to see is like your skill set almost stick out in a way. Because if I'm not mistaken, you guys had some 5-man protection stuff, and you're
Yeah.
getting the ball out quick, and they're sending pressures, but that's just like that's another day that ends in Y, right? Because
Yeah.
you've had all this experience and preparation where you got, I don't know, you're playing 3-on-3 linemen in the trenches and in arena, and then all these things are going on, and you gotta get the ball out quick, but then you're able to kinda create a little extra elongated pocket, and you're hitting a few crossers. Take us through the Super Bowl. I mean, you guys obviously tight game, and then you need to go
Yeah.
down and score, and you almost do too quick, but take us through the
Yeah.
whole experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was, an incredible year, about as magical as it could be for a guy like myself after the journey that I had had and to see it play out the way that it did. And, I mean, just you couldn't write it any better. I mean, my first pass in the playoffs was a 77-yard touchdown pass. Like it was just like one thing after another. You're just like, this is like unreal. It's like it couldn't be any better. And then you get to the Super Bowl, and we didn't necessarily play our best game in the Super Bowl. But, we got up early, we threw for like 300 yards in the first half. It was all the stuff that we had done all year long. We were doing in the Super Bowl. The problem was we just weren't putting the ball in the end zone. So we only had a 16-0 lead, in the fourth quarter of that game. And then the Titans came all the way back, right? And they ended up tying it up 16-16 in the fourth quarter and kind of had stole the momentum. And to your point, we get the ball back with just over 2 minutes to go. And I remember, Coach Ramil kind of grabbing me on the sideline, and he's like, "All right, you've played it out in your front yard a million times. Now go do it for real, right?" Because all of us that have been quarterbacks, have played the Super Bowl in our front yard a million times. Me and my brother, every Super Bowl that we'd watch, we'd go out and we'd be kind of the stars, the quarterback and receiver, and I'm always throwing the game-winning pass. If the clock goes to zero, and we win the Super Bowl every year. So here we are. You got 2 minutes to go. Go do it for real. And then, yeah, amazingly enough, it was my first throw. My first throw as I come off the sideline, I throw it to Isaac Bruce, 73 yards, touchdown. And, I often joke about it because never in my front yard was there any time left on the clock. So when I threw the touchdown pass in my front yard, game was over. We win. We ride off into the sunset. Here, there's still about 2 minutes to go on the clock at this point. Now, the one blessing was I felt like worst case scenario, it was going to be tied because we had a touchdown lead. But just like you said, knowing Steve McNair and the kind of player that he was and the competitor that he was and the momentum that they had in the fourth quarter, now I'm sitting over on the sideline and I'm like, man, this isn't how it's supposed to work. Now, you understand why it's a great team game because, unlike baseball or basketball, I don't get to play both ways. It is out of my hands now. And so now it's left up to those 12 or those 11 guys on the field and those defensive players to have to step up and make a play. And I've been in a number of Super Bowls obviously in my career, and even though I didn't know it at that time, I've seen great players make great plays in great moments that basically can steal. I say steal, they not steal it, but where you think that you've got a Super Bowl
You have
championship
it,
in your
yeah.
hands, and the other team makes great plays and takes that from you, and you have to tip your hat to them. And so, watching that drive was the longest drive of my life. To watching it and the clock just ticking, and they getting out of bounds when they needed to, and Steve McNair when you think you got him sacked, and he comes out of out of the sack and finds a way to make a play and all of that stuff, leading up to that, the last play to Kevin Dyson. And, from the angle that I'm standing on the sideline, all I see is Dyson reach out, and I couldn't tell how close he was to the goal line. Could he reach the goal line? So I remember him reaching out. I remember looking at the clock, and the clock said all zeros. And from there, I went and looked at the official to see what the official had ruled, and I saw him kind of waving it off that it wasn't a touchdown. So that was kind of the sequence that I had to go through to realize we had won the championship. But, it gives you great appreciation for winning as a team and winning, in the NFL or the game of football, that it takes everybody. Everybody's got to do their job and make their play when they have an opportunity. We did it on offense. Our defense did it, and it was ultimately why we became champions.
Yeah.
Yeah. The throw to Bruce too, I mean, that's all go, right? I mean,
It
they
was
were
all
going.
go. Yep.
It was it.
Yep.
I
Yep. We
mean,
had talked about it all week long. And, these are the fun stories behind the scenes is that, the Titans like to play what we call high shoulder man technique. So, they didn't want you to get over the top of them. They were just going to play and kind of match you on the high shoulder. And so we had talked all week about, okay, if we throw some go routes, we're going to throw the back shoulder. So the back shoulder wasn't what it is now, right? Every quarterback throws it now. It's a part of every playbook. It's part of every adjustment. It wasn't really back then. And so, our back shoulder was, hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you to lay it out there with touch, but I want you to, to leave it a little bit short so our guy can adjust to it back because they're going to be playing on the high shoulder. And so we had talked about it all week. And then sure enough, it was man. They dropped into man coverage. We had the high shoulder technique. Now I'm going to pretend like it was a perfect pass. It was probably Javon Curse smashing me in the face that allowed the ball to be on the back shoulder and it allowed it to be perfect. But because we had talked about it all week, I'm going to let people know that it was the perfect throw based on everything we talked about. But it worked out perfectly. He played high shoulder. Isaac was able to adjust and come back to it, and not only come back to it, but then make his way for a touchdown. And so it's so amazing, this game and the things you talk about and how certain things turn out and play out. So just like you had talked about it, just like you had worked on all week long, even in the biggest moment.
You're touching on your preparation a little bit. Can you give us an inside look at like your pre-snap process? You break the huddle, you're headed to the line. Can you just, from an NFL Hall of Famer, what was
Yeah.
your secret sauce? Like what are you looking at? Just give us a little bit of inside information on that.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was it was all play dependent. where I know we talk a lot about, hey, look at the back, the backside safety, and he'll tell you what to do. And all those things were in, my repertoire of, hey, on the snap, if you're not sure, see the safety. Safety's got to tell you where they're going to go. Other people can lie a little bit. But for me, it was all based on what the play was. There were some plays that all I cared about was, is the corner in an off position or a rolled position? There were other times that I would look at the linebackers and I could see the linebackers, spread out in a certain position, knowing, hey, a safety is going to drop down here, or hey, because they're in this set, they can't bring pressure and make me hot over here. And so I would say my checklist was always corners first. I wanted to know what position the corners were in. What could they take away, or were the possibilities over there? Was I going to have a one-on-one because the corner was an off position type of thing? The next thing I would do is I would see linebackers, and I would, try to look at positioning of them based on our formations, our set, what they were capable of, what the possibilities were for them. And then lastly, it was always the safeties, and that was before the snap, but then after the snap as well, because that was where I was going to get my biggest indication, right? If they're sitting in the middle of the field and they're not supposed to be there on the snap, they're going to be flying somewhere. They're going to be telling me where they're going. And so that was what I would do on the snap if those other things weren't pertinent to me. There were plays I didn't care what the safeties did, right? There were certain concepts that were more about, hey, what's happening underneath? I don't care what those guys are doing. And if the corner's off, okay, this tells me what kind of coverage I've got against this. So that checklist wasn't always the same checklist. It was really based off of, okay, what are we trying to do? And then what do I need to know as a quarterback? And so that was how I went about it. You talk about preparation, and you talk about a checklist. All the quarterbacks that I work with, I always tell them, one of the most important things you can do in the early stages is figure out who you are as a quarterback. So you guys can ask me, or you guys can ask Tom Brady, or you guys can ask Peyton Manning, and we may have similar things that we did, or it may be completely different for all of us. And we were all really good quarterbacks, but the key was, okay, figure out who you are, what you can do, and how you can be the best version of yourself. So I always like to use the example of like Peyton Manning and myself. I don't think anybody's ever been better at playing the game before the snap than Peyton Manning. His ability to recognize different things, to get into the right play, all of that stuff was the best that I've ever seen. I knew that I wasn't nearly as good before the snap. I didn't have the patience for it. I didn't want to try to figure everything out. Where I was really good was after the snap. You show me something, I'll see it. I'll be able to react to it. I'll throw a hot, all that stuff. That's where I was great. And so where you talk about preparation throughout the week, I'm going to bet you that Peyton Manning watched a lot more tape than I did, because he was watching tape to get a tell from the defense. Okay, what are they going to do here? Well, if this guy does that, or if they get in this front, they're going to probably go to this coverage. Good, I can change it to that play. I spent a lot more time studying my offense. I just wanted to know, what are the answers against everything that they can throw at me. So if they do this, oh, this is what I'm doing. They do that, this is what I'm doing. So I was more worried about my answers to our offense than I was the answers to what the defense was gonna do. But I knew that was my strength. That was my superpower. So that's where I spent more of my time than watching tape. I'm not sitting here saying I didn't watch tape. I watched a lot of tape, but I watched it for different reasons. I was watching it and looking to get ideas and schemes and understand what they did, not to try to determine this is what they're going to do. This is exactly what I'm going to see. Mine was just, hey, I want to know the structure. I want to know what they like to do. Boom. Now, whatever they do, I'm going to be able to react to it because I know my offense so well. And so I think, when you're talking to guys, it's easy for everybody to go, I'm going to be Peyton Manning. I'm going to get really good at the stuff before the snap, and I'm going to be able to change the play and get into everything. Not everybody thinks like that. Not everybody's good like that. And so you have to figure out what it is that you're great at, or what you can be great at, what can separate you. And then you have to change and adapt your preparation to being the best version of that quarterback. And so that's what I always tell people is I'm happy to share all the stuff that I did, but it just doesn't always apply to everybody. You got to figure those things out and say, hey, I'm not going to waste my time on this. And just because that's not going to allow me to excel, this is. I'm going to focus my energies and time on this sort of thing, and figuring out what that plan is and that preparation plan is for each and every one of us is what becomes key to allowing us to be the best version we can be.
Yeah. I think that's such good advice and an interesting perspective, but I totally agree with you. How much did mechanics play a role in your preparation, or was that something that you thought about? Obviously, you look at the evolution of quarterback training and the heavy emphasis on mechanics and the evolution of how quarterbacks throw the football. Like, for you, was that something that you tried to fine tune and you would say improved over your career? Was it something that just came naturally to you? What was your
Yeah.
focus on mechanics at that point in time?
Mechanics were always important to me, but I was taught a lot of different ways. It's not like now where they have all these trainers and all these coaches that are out there. A lot of times when I was growing up, I didn't have a quarterback coach. I didn't have anybody that ever played the position or knew what was going on. I just had a coach, right? I mean,
Right.
I don't know. John wants to come out and be a coach. Okay, you coach the quarterbacks. Like he didn't know anything. Okay, let me try to do that. Like that's what it was. And so much of my learning, just came from playing and throwing. And I would have some people along the way that would teach me certain things or that I could watch and go, okay, we had a quarterback coach in college that the guy that had played at my university, and he was a really good player at my university. And so I would watch him throw, and he would also give me a few pointers along the way, even though it wasn't, heavy technique stuff. He would give me some pointers because he had such great balance, the way that he threw from the ground up and the way that he used his lower body. And so there were things that I picked up along the way. So it's ironic that now that when I coach quarterbacks, I coach off of what I've learned from myself, not really what anybody's ever coached me. I know what's worked for me. I believe I was as accurate as anybody that's ever thrown a football. And so those kinds of things that I learned what the technique was that I played with, just by feeling the throw and learning it and watching myself more than I was coached by certain people and pulled things from certain people. But because I learned it from myself, I was always coaching myself on those things. Like I was always self-scouting myself when I would watch a play and, miss a throw and yeah, your feet came too close together, or look at you at the top of the drop, you're not keeping your base and your power there. So it was very important to me, but I was also very good from a technique standpoint. Like my shoulders were always really balanced. I could always, create power the way I wanted to create power. I hardly ever had to throw the ball hard. Like if you go back and watch my highlights, you're not going to see me throwing the ball, at a high velocity. I could anticipate, I could throw, I could get the ball where I wanted it to be when I wanted it to be there without having to create, this huge torque and throw it really, really hard. And so, because I was good at that stuff, I tell people all the time, like when I got to the NFL, I hardly ever picked up a ball in the off season. Yeah, I would hardly ever throw in the off season. And, my theory was that, me throwing another slant against air was not going to make me any better. Like, I can throw a slant against air. Like, you give me your off coverage and you have me throw a slant, I won't miss the slant. You know, I'll make an 18-yard comeback. I can make whatever throw because my technique was really, really strong. So all I kind of said was, okay, I don't want to overthrow. I know there's probably only so many throws in my arm. I'll just wait till training camp, and it'll probably take me 3 days to get kind of back into rhythm in the field. But, I'm not one of those guys that needs more reps to be really good at throwing a football. So my off seasons were, heavily, connected to working my feet more than throwing the football. And so some of that was technique related and footwork related. But I always knew one of my great weaknesses was my footwork, my speed, my athleticism from that standpoint. So I was always doing activities that would work my feet and make sure that that didn't become a liability for me. And also knowing that technique was so, connected to my feet, and it wasn't about my arm, right? It wasn't about me making another throw. It was about if I get my feet and shoulders and body in the correct position, the arm's going to follow and I don't have to worry about it. And so that's what my off season and when you talk about technique, the things that I focused on was making sure that my feet were in the right position, make sure my body was in the right position, knowing that the throw was going to follow all of that stuff. but a lot of it came from just me self-scouting and watching certain things that I knew were important and always making sure that, hey, if it was off, at a particular time, I was going through a bit of a slump. Hey, I went out and if I was working a drill, coach might not have been saying, hey, let's work your feet and your shoulders. Hey, we're going to work this throw and this read. But I knew in my mind, okay, we're going to focus on getting back to these basics because those basics will always lead you, and when I, train guys now, I have never had a guy come to my facility that's been able to out throw me. And I don't ever throw. Like I don't pick up a football unless I'm training guys. But I use that as an example to these guys. The bottom line is once you learn how to do it, it's like riding a bike. It never leaves you. I understand the sequencing. I understand where the power comes from. I understand how to, create my line so I can be accurate with the football. And so now I can just pick up a football and I can throw it. And I'm going to be accurate because I learned the right way. And that to me is what becomes so important with technique is understanding the right way to throw a football. And once you understand that, it doesn't matter what throw you make. Like if you're making a 5-yard throw, a 20-yard throw, or a 40-yard throw, if everything else is connected, you're going to be able to make all of those throws as long as you've got enough power. And so that really became, my focus when I was playing was knowing what those things were and always fine tuning them in every drill that I did, whether that was a coach's focus or not. I knew what I needed to do so that would, continue to be the strength of mine and it would continue to carry me.
Yeah. And I think like you mentioned before, like it's different for each individual, and I think just from you telling the last couple stories, like you really understood what you needed to make yourself the best version or the best quarterback that you could be, right? Whether it was the pre-snap process or what you're going to focus on as far as post-snap or even in the off season, how you're going to handle it, right? I think everyone is a little bit different, but for you, you knew that for you, it was all about balance and footwork and that's what you were going to work on and focus your off season. And I think that's just great for kids to hear, right? It's like, it's different for each individual and you need to know it. You need to learn it. And once you can figure out how to do it the proper way, then you're headed in the right direction. I saw a tweet
And
that
if you
yeah,
can
go
do it
ahead.
on your own,
Yeah.
because that's I think the other thing, like with you guys training, what I see with a lot of kids now is they want you to tell them what they did wrong. Now, I've got a son who's played a good college career. He's trying to, get a shot in the NFL now. And I remember when we would train, every time he would throw a football, and if I wouldn't say anything, he's like, "Dad, what I do? What was wrong? What should I have done different?" And it's like, hold on a second. You need to figure this out on your own. You need to figure out how much core you've engaged. You need to figure out when your shoulders are off balance because if you're going to wait for me to always tell you, you're never going to be able to get better on your own. You're never going to be able to go out there and work and learn the little things that, and so that's why when I was sharing my story, like I would watch myself on film and I wouldn't wait for the coach to go, "Hey, look at your shoulders." I would be like, "Shoulders got tipped there. We need to keep those." Like I knew what it took to get better. I could have my dad come out and videotape me, and I could tell by watching it, look what happened. Your weight was up front, brought your feet to like that to me is so critical for this day and age because they're so used
Couldn't agree
to
more.
having somebody tell them, here's the drill we're going to do. Here's the throw we're going to make. Here's what you did wrong. And so then they leave and it's like, I don't know how to get any better. Like, I don't know what I did. I don't have a coach sitting here telling me what drill to run and what to do. And so that's where I think it's so important too, is to know yourself, but to understand what you're being taught and really understand it to the point where you can go back and improve on your own. Because I would have to guess you guys like me, like that's how I got better. I got better, throwing the ball on my own. Like became a better pitcher because I would pitch 9 innings to a taped square on the wall. Not because there was a guy back there going, "Oh, that was a strike." "Hey, that was a good like."
Yeah.
Did it. I went and learned and figured out how it worked and threw the same pass over and over again when I was young to go, "Oh, look, I can do this the same way as long as." And so I think that's a critical piece that a lot of kids miss now because they're so used to having their hand held with all of this training and all of this stuff that when it falls back to them, they don't know how to get any better. They don't know how to improve and become great because they're dependent on so many people on the outside telling them.
Yeah. I
I think
totally agree.
that's when we see the biggest growth even in our kids. It's like they can beat me to the punchline. Like I'm about to say it and they're like, "I got it. This is it." And then they get the ball back and then they fix it and they kind of self-operate and that self-correction phase like you're talking about like massive. And then Mike was probably going to go into this, but we have kids who also come on to help coach. And then
Mhm.
when they start to see other kids and they start to see thousands of reps, a week or a month or whatever it is, and now they're seeing other people make the same mistakes, and that's helping them in their
Sure.
development because now
Yep.
they just through a bunch of different lenses that they start to see, and then in themselves, like I can fix this myself and I can get better at this myself. One of the things I did want to hit on you, I know I want to be respectful of your time and get going here, but I've heard you talk about quarterback athleticism and its distinction from just traditional athleticism and fluidity. Can you kind of go into that along with your like
Yeah.
developmental philosophy there?
Yeah, I think we've fallen in love with measurables. And I think we all understand, that measurables can mean something, jump high, throw far, run fast. I get it, and I understand where that plays a part. But for a quarterback, I think it's such a small part of the game. Just the ability to throw the ball really hard. Like as I said earlier, I could probably count the number of times on two hands that I've ever thrown the ball in a game as hard as I possibly can, or as far as I possibly can. You don't need to, so it's not that important. The number of times that I've had to run a 40-yard dash on a football field, again, could count them on one hand. Like it's not, so to me, it's about the ability to be athletic, the ability to move in short spaces and to be able to not only move, but move and reset and do the things that we're talking about, right? To me, it's how quickly can I get into a throwing position? When I have to move, how quickly can I get back into a throwing position? Or how many different positions can I throw from? You talk about athleticism. To me, there's athletic traits, and those athletic traits are how fast I run and how far I throw. And I believe athleticism is the ability to control your body. That's what I believe athleticism is. Whether that's running and the ability to cut, for a receiver, the ability to get in and out of a break quickly is the ability to control their body through different things. A defensive back, the ability to stop and get going again. And for a quarterback, it's the ability to lead with your body. And whatever that means, if I'm catching it in the pocket and my ability to use my core, boom, to reset me over here to the left to make a throw. Whether it's, hey, I got pressure in my face and I can't ever set my feet and I've got to make a touch throw over here to the left. Do I have the ability to lead with my body? And so that became, and for me, it's a huge trait. When I watch quarterbacks, because there's a lot of guys that can make every throw if everything's perfect, right? If I can catch and turn my feet and get my whole body set and throw a wide receiver screen, I'm going to make the throw most of the time. Well, you are because it's a 10-yard throw and you're going to make it. But can you make it if the defensive end is free and you got to fall away to your right and make a throw? Can you make it if you've got to throw it over, a defensive lineman to make that can you control and do things with your body, in terms of making different kinds of throws? And there's a lot of guys that struggle with those things. Even top level, quarterbacks, they struggle with the ability to do that sort of stuff. I think Patrick Mahomes is a great example of a guy that plays the quarterback position athletically. The ability to move his body and make different kinds of throws and put himself in position to make throws because his body is is what's leading him in so many cases. And so I would work on that a lot. I played a lot of sports growing up, and would even play a lot of sports in the off season than when I was playing in the NFL. So less throwing the football and more playing other sports. Didn't matter what the sport was, playing basketball. I often think like back when I was, playing basketball and I would go up for a layup, you have a defender there, having the ability to go up in the air, turn my body and protect the ball, and then get the ball back up and score it. That ability to control my body and do different things with my body. Because I think so much of quarterback play is our ability to create that torque in small movements. Sometimes we get 3 or 4 inches, boom, to create that torque and to lead with our body. That's the kind of stuff to me when I talk about quarterback athleticism. It's that ability to use our body to make those quick movements, to reset, to make a throw without our feet, where we've got to lead with other parts of our body. That to me is what playing quarterback is all about. And you need all of those assets. It's not just, hey, I can turn and throw the ball really hard, or I can take off and run really fast. That's such a small part of playing the game. It's being able to do different things and control the football in different ways when everything is not perfect. That is what I call quarterback athleticism. So for me, when I watch all these drills and they ask quarterbacks, hey, drop back and then run over here and then run over there and then run over here and then run over there. And I'm like, that does nothing for me because what I need is to drop back and I need to move really quickly, a yard and a half, and reset and throw the football. Like, that's what I need. That's quarterback athleticism. Not how many times can I go back and forth and then set and
Yeah.
throw. Like, those are the things to me that are important. And I just think we lose sight of that too often. That it's small, quick movement, the ability to move and reset, that kind of stuff. The ability to move and then not set my feet, but still make it like those are the things that are crucial, and I don't think people work on it enough. Like you see kids, and again, I use my son as an example. Man, nobody threw more than my son, and he always just felt like, hey, I'm out there throwing, nobody else is throwing, I'm working more than anybody else. And yes, if you give him a chance to set his feet, I'll put his accuracy up against anybody. But when he would go out in the backyard, that's what it always was, right? I'm dropping back, 5-step drop. I'm going to throw a measured corner route because we're running against air, and I'm going to do this over and over again. And yes, you're going to be really good at those things. But now I want you to drop back and then have to fall to the left and throw that without your feet. I want to see, can you make the same kind of throw? Hey, is the defender high? Is the defender low? Like, that's the kind of stuff that, you take it to the next step, where I just think so much of training is just, hey, everything's a perfect world. Everything's clean. I'm going to tell you what the look is. I'm going to tell you what the throw is. And we make that throw. And you guys know, as you get higher and higher levels, everybody can make those throws. Everybody makes those throws, like pro days. Pro days are great. Like, again, they have their purpose. But I mean, shoot, my son was 42 for 43. So and so was 53 of 56. Like, it's like, yeah, you're supposed to. Like,
Yeah.
you're throwing against air.
You're
You
on
know
air.
what you're doing. Lay it out there. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. I want to see the other factors, because the other factors to me is what quarterback is all about, is when things aren't perfect. How successful can you be? How many different kinds of throws can you make, right? When the linebacker drops to 8 yards, can you throw the ball over him? When he drops to 10 yards, can you throw the ball over him? When he goes to 12 yards, nope, you can't do that. Well, I can. So I just gained an advantage because I have the ability to throw with my body, to tip my shoulders, to get the ball up, to get it to drop. And so it's those kinds of things when you talk about quarterback athleticism, where I'm talking about using the entirety of our body to make different throws and to make throws effortless and to make them fluid, and not, again, I can watch guys throw screens oftentimes and go, okay, he's got it, he doesn't. Right? You see these guys trying to throw screens and it's got to be perfect, and they can't throw with any touch, and you're just like, oh my gosh, watching somebody struggle throw a screen. But it's a part of it. It's a part of, do you understand the athletic part of again, being athletic, what that means, and the ability to control those muscles. I use this dumb example all the time, but as much success as I had on the football field, I also did Dancing with the Stars. And I remember talking to one of the dancers on Dancing with the Stars, because they were doing whatever, the pop and lock thing. And, he could move like this small little muscle on his shoulder by itself, and he's like, you try it. And I try it, and I'm like moving, everything moves. I can't just move that one muscle. And I'm like, how do you do that? Is that just something you could do? And he goes, I would sometimes go to a session, and I would stand in front of a mirror, and I would focus on moving that one muscle in my shoulder for an hour. Like, he would fine tune it down to that. So, hey, I got to do that here, and now I got to do it with my arm, and I got to do it with my wrist. And I'm like, are you serious? He goes, yeah. I had to train these muscles to be explosive, or to be able to control those muscles. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, and so I have the ability to do that with my core, is to engage my core and be explosive with my core in small movements. I'll ask other kids to do that. And when they try to do that, it's like their whole body has to move. And you're like, all right, you don't get it. That's the problem. I need it to be fast and explosive, because you only get 6 inches. You don't get 12 inches here. You don't get 18 inches here to create the torque. Can you do it? And it's kind of the same thing where I'll go and focus on, maybe a med ball, boom. And I'm throwing it for 3 or 4, just I get 3 or 4 inches to explode it against a wall. Instead of taking it, like you'll see a lot of guys take the ball way back here and they run to the wall and they whip it up against the wall. And it's like, okay, great. You don't get that
You don't
much.
have that
You,
space.
you know,
Yeah.
you get this much space to create that. Can you do that? And so it's learning and utilizing those things and finding exercises or even sports. Like I said about, basketball. Like I would do a lot of that stuff in the off season because it would teach me certain movements and things that I would never get practicing quarterback, right? Going out and dropping back and throwing a corner route is never going to teach me some of those things. I've got to do athletic things to learn how to be athletic. And so that was a big part of my training, all growing up. But even when I was playing in the NFL, man, I'm playing racquetball and I'm playing basketball and, other, whatever. Sometimes I'm throwing a baseball, just, out doing things that are teaching me how to truly engage my core and be athletic, or the quarterback athletic stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, I love to hear that because our philosophy in training really is like creating a chaotic and random environment. Like throwing as many different things at them and how do you react and get your body quickly into a position to make a good throw, an accurate throw, and then layering complexity on top of that, whether it's a read or like you
Mhm.
mentioned, is he dropping at 5 yards? Is he at 10 yards? Do I have to layer it? Am I throwing it back shoulder here? Am I putting touch on this ball?
Correct.
Like
Yeah.
I think those things are so important for kids to hear and try to find ways to train it. But I think also transfer of training with other sports and movements and quality of
Yep.
movement and body control and all those things you
Right.
touched on are extremely valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you guys watched too, like just a flag football game that happened however many weeks ago, that, Team USA
Yeah. Yep.
against the NFL players.
Oh, yeah. It's
And, I
unbelievable.
mean, just things like that where I think about growing up, like when you're playing flag football with your buddies, you never get to drop back 3 yards and set up and throw. Like you got somebody rushing you at all times. And so you're out there for an hour learning how to throw. Okay, I'm throwing away from pressure. I got to run away from pressure and throw. Just those kinds of things become so valuable. And again, we lose sight of that. Like, our kids now, if they're going to train, they want to go train and do quarterback centric stuff. Whereas I just believe, man, going out there for 2 hours playing with your buddies, while they're running around and, running like how much that taught me about playing quarterback and making different throws. Cause I just had to do it for 2 hours. There was never
Right.
it's just about technique and it's about getting your feet lined up and like, I know there's a place for that, but I think there's a place for, kind of your point, more of the chaotic, and you don't even think about it, right? Like I wasn't thinking about that when I was playing with my buddies. Like, oh, get your core turned and then attack your target. No, I was like, make the throw. Like, how do you make the throw? And then I'm okay. I made the throw, and then I made it
Yeah.
again, and I
You
made it
try to
again,
do that. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now I'm learning how to do it by just playing a sport and having a blast. And now it's starting to become muscle memory, and I'm starting to control my body and do some of those things that I think are so important.
Yeah, and I think the self-organizing piece too of like getting people lined up, like
Yeah.
taking control, being the leader,
Yeah.
where in a lot of training environments, it's you're going to do this. This is the drill you're going to do. This is how you do it, and then I'm going to give you
Yep.
feedback on it. So that's where we've
Exactly.
tried to improve. Of like, all right, you know what we're doing. Like you set it up. Like, and what did you feel here? And
Right.
you talk us through it. So putting as much ownership on the kid to help them develop and be
I
able to
love it.
communicate and organize, I think is
Yep.
extremely valuable.
You were going to ask me about a tweet earlier.
Yes,
Or
yeah.
Yes.
I
So
cut.
I got a question on that, but were you Al?
No, I
No,
was
I
just,
think
that was,
yeah.
that was,
Okay.
I
Yep.
that was
think
good recall.
Yeah. So I saw you tweet about like you see quarterbacks training all the time, but there's no mental aspect to the drill. Like they're just throwing
Mhm.
routes on air. How would you, because you said you train quarterbacks, what do you do to add like mental aspects to drills?
Yeah, I mean, to me, what good is it if? And again, there's a level and there's a point where I don't want to add anything mental because we're not ready for that yet.
Yeah, right. You
But
gotta,
once you're getting to the level that I'm talking about, where I'm seeing college guys train and pro guys train and higher level training, and you go like again, everybody can make these throws, and so I watch all these things and I'm like, I'm to the point now where I watch all these guys post these videos of their quarterbacks, and I'm like, great. But the first thing that comes to my mind, but can they play? Like, I don't care if they can throw. A lot of guys can throw. Can they play? What are they seeing? How are they changing it up? You just have them dropping back and then throwing a throw. Like, okay, I can do that too. So to me, the mental aspect can be a lot of different things, because it depends on what kind of setup you have. Unfortunately, we can't always get 7-on-7. We don't always get 7 defenders, so we can read everything. But to me, it's simple stuff, just like, hey, we're just gonna throw a slant. Okay. I want to put a defender out there just simply for the fact that I want you to see, is the corner on or is the corner pressed? And if the corner's pressed, here's what we're going to do. If you see the corner pressed, what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you hit and hold on your back foot, knowing he's got to get off the press and it's going to take him a half a second longer. Okay. So even if it's something as simple as that, like all you're seeing is just the initial look right before the snap. Did he come up and press? Did he stay off? So now at least there's another element to, hey, I know if a guy's being pressed, I got to give him time to separate, because that slant route is not going to be the same timing as an off slant. Okay. I'll do stuff all the time. Like, let's just say I'm throwing a hot flat to the left-hand side. Okay. So I'll get my guys to throw a hot flat to the left-hand side. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, now we're hot, and I'm going to give them a defender. And as they're going back, that defender is either going to undercut them. So now they're being forced to not only see the hot, but now I got to make the throw up and over the top, or the defender's just going to stay high on them, and I got to just drive it out in front of them. And so it can be as simple as just putting one guy there to give them a change of whatever it is. Sometimes I'll do like a quick post. We used to call it F post, one of our favorite routes. Okay, so we got an F post, and then we would just put another quarterback over here on a swing route. Okay, so you're going to come back, and on your 5th step, you're going to hit and throw that post. But I'm going to put the coach or whoever it is, maybe it's just me, I'm going to stand there as the Mike linebacker. So as you're going back, you got to see, do I stay here? Do I take a step towards the post, or do I, cover whatever? And so now all they've got to see on those first 5 steps what that guy does. Okay, he takes 1 step, boom, pop your feet and throw the swing. Like, it's elements like that when we talk about hots. So I'm a believer that I don't do a lot of stuff with guys where I'm trying to teach them movement and the athletic part of it. I tell them, you have to learn how to be an athlete. I'm not going to do enough drills where I'm rushing you and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to teach you how to throw it where you need to throw it, when you need to throw it. And then you've got to learn how to be an athlete, because I'm not really worried about that. We're going to win more often if I can get you to throw it where you need to throw it, when you need to throw it. And then every once in a while, when your guard misses, you got to go play. I can't get you ready for that. But like, let's say we're working a drill where I'm throwing a curl route. Okay. I'm gonna do that at times, and then I may have a guy pressure them. So you're gonna throw the curl route, you're gonna throw the curl route, you're gonna throw, oh shoot, one time in there, you're gonna get pressure, and you got to throw it hot. Okay. Or vice versa. I'm gonna give you a hot. He's coming, and then one time I'm gonna have him step towards you and then drop back. So you've got to go, oh, I'm hot, oh, I'm not hot. And now I got to reset my drop, and I got to throw the curl route. So everything I'm doing, I'm trying to add an element of, okay, here's the drill. Here's what we're trying to work on. But then I'm going to give you something that could happen. It's not going to happen every time, because that's the other thing with like movement drills. Hey, here's the deal. Your guard's going to miss, and you're going to have to move. So every time your quarterback drop back, he never gets set to throw the curl. He just stands, and then he's just waiting to move. I'm going to say, we're going to throw a curl. We're going to throw a curl. And then one time in here, your guard might miss, and I might be on top of you, and you've got to move and reset and throw the curl. But what I'm teaching you is throw the curl. Get in the right proper technique. Do it every single time. So you're ready to do that whether the guard misses or not. And then if he misses, now you've got to be in a position to be able to take advantage of that. So when I talk about a mental piece, it's always, and again, it's not just, hey, this guy's going to cover the curl every time. No, we're going to go curl flag. Okay, I want you to work on the curl. So I'm going to give you the curl most of the time, but I'm still going to have a flat element. I'm going to still have somebody for you to read every single time. So you are ready for that transition when it happens. So that to me becomes so important. Doesn't have to be a big element, just has to be an element. What are they looking at? What are they thinking about? How do I change their thought process, through the course of a play to get them to still be able to do the right thing physically while they're thinking about something that could change mentally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And it gets them thinking about the big picture and the concept and problem solving, like you mentioned earlier. Like, yes, in a perfect
Yeah,
world, this is what we want to do, and this is going to be our feat, but this may
right.
happen, and we have to be prepared for that as well.
Yeah.
So I
So
think
I'll give you
that
another example. I don't
adding
know if
that
you guys
element
do
was
it.
perfect.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. I don't know if you guys do it, but I have people ask me all the time, okay, the drill where quarterback sets up and they go, okay, you're setting up and now you have to move. Do you move your front foot first or your back foot first? Right? You guys know what I'm talking about? You're
Yeah,
set up at the top of
100%.
the drop
Yeah, yeah.
and you get some pressure and, there's a huge debate all over that, hey, you move front foot or back foot first? And, my first question to them is always, okay, where in the drop is this? Okay. So if this is at the top of the drop, okay, then there's only one answer to that question for me. Like if you've allowed the quarterback to get to the top of his drop, the only foot he should be able to move first is his front foot because he should be loaded in his back foot every
On his
single
back
time,
foot. Yeah,
right? He should
yeah,
be. Like
yeah.
if he's not, then he's not ready to play quarterback. And so if you're asking him to throw a curl route, again, using that example, he gets to the top of his route. He's hitting his back foot. He's loading up. He's quick hitching the balls to the curl. And so the only way for him to move his back foot first is to get back there. If he is loaded, to shift his weight to the front and then
Yeah.
move his back foot. Who's ever going to tell their quarterback to do that? Now, if you're telling me that the guy hasn't got to the top of his drop yet and he's just dropping back and gets pressure, then I don't care which foot he moves first.
Yeah.
Go be an athlete. Because at that
That's our
point, it's
thought
like
process on it. Yeah.
wherever the pressure comes from, now you have to react. But if you are at the top of your drop, you should be loaded into your back foot. If you're not ready to play quarterback like I'm asking you to play quarterback. And so I'll see so many of those drills, and a coach will say, hey, I want you to move your back foot first. So they're never setting to play quarterback, right? They're never setting to throw the curl because they're playing the drill. And that's what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean
yeah.
by the mental
Yeah.
part of it. We're
Totally
going to throw
agree.
a curl.
Yeah.
We're going to set to throw a curl. The mental part will be there may be pressure at some point. I don't know when it's going to come. You might already be set. You might not be set. Whatever it is, you have got to react properly to that pressure. Get back, get loaded, and then from there we move. And so it's those kinds of things that I think are so important instead of just creating a drill that's the
Drill.
same thing every time. And so it just becomes monotonous, physical, trying to make this throw without ever asking them to think the position.
Well, you're just getting good at a drill. You're not getting good at playing quarterback.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like I said,
The
there's
other
a
issue,
place for that before a kid is capable of doing the other
correct.
thing.
The
But
base
once they get
fundamentals.
capable
Yeah.
of that, to just ask them to continually throw a slant against air, like we're defeating the purpose, in my opinion.
I agree.
One of the things too that I think aligns with that is the tempo in which people train. Like I think a lot of times kids get being comfortable and like hitting passes, like you're saying, like I'm just gonna throw this slant and my objective is to look at the outcome. And if I throw it on, I'm like, that's a good rep. Versus if you're going 80%, like you're not practicing anything that you're gonna do in a game because you are never gonna go 80% in a game.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that it's just aligned similarly to that. And then, like you said, staying on schedule and being able to throw in rhythm with the which foot moves first. And Mike touched on it, like I don't I don't give a shit which foot moves first. Like just get yourself in a position to make the throw. But this has been incredible. I want to continue to talk ball as much as we can, but I want to be respectful of your time. We do the 2-minute drill. I don't know if you've seen anything that we've done or posted,
Okay.
but the 2-minute drill, we come at you with quick hitting questions that
Okay.
may deserve longer answers than we're allocating for, but
Okay.
we just want to kind of just rip right through it. But I think there's no clock. It's theoretical. It's in my head. It's probably going to be a 4-minute drill. But Mike, you want to kick it off here?
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So I'll start the clock. Here we go. First
Here we
question:
go.
favorite NFL play call?
Favorite play call?
Like
525 F post
throughout
swing.
your career, what was your go-to?
Yeah. 525 F post swing. Yeah.
Toughest defense
Tampa Bay.
you ever played.
Tampa Bay, defense from the 2000s, early 2000s, 99. The true Tampa 2 defense up in Brooks and Lynch and
Dungy,
company.
Gruden.
Awesome. Yep.
Similar to that, hardest hit you ever took?
The last one, I got hit by Bobby McRae in my last football game, and it's funny to this day when my kids want to show somebody that hit, they just look up on the internet, Kurt Warner died. And so if you look up Kurt Warner died on the internet, it will show you that hit. I threw an interception, and I was going to try to chase down the interceptor, and from my blind side, Bobby McRae just crushed me. It was one of those hits where I knew I was okay on the outside, but I felt like all my insides were broken, like a car crash, and I was sore for 2 weeks after that. But it happened to be in the last game that I ever played, a playoff game against New Orleans.
Is the greatest show on turf the best offense the NFL has ever seen?
No doubt in my mind, not just because of the talent, the consistency by which we did it at a time when nobody did it like that. At a time when it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust, we ushered in, I think, what the NFL is now. And they've changed rules so that teams can do what we did during that time period. So I'll still argue to this day that I think it was the best offense ever.
Toughest coach you ever had throughout your career?
Mike Martz. Yeah. I mean, by far, just the way that he pushed me and challenged me, and he coached a lot through me before I became the starter. And so by far the toughest and hardest on me.
Is it true that he pinned that $50 bill to the bulletin board? I saw
I
something
don't know
on
if
a
that was
films feature.
100% accurate like that, but yes, very, very similar to that. Different things like that, the kind of mental gymnastics of, hey, if you can ever throw a spiral, you can have this $50. Yeah, there was a lot of things that were challenging like that, and things that were said like that to try to get the best out of it.
And then in terms of the analysis aspect, 2026 draft class, Mendoza, Simpson, who's a guy you think that might be day 2, day 3 undrafted? And I'm gonna ask you a separate question about EJ in a minute here, but
Okay.
of this class, like
Yeah.
who do you think is someone that could have a pretty good standing career?
Yeah, I mean, we'll leave Mendoza and Simpson because I think, those are the two highest prospect guys. I think Drew Aller is going to be an interesting one because I think from a gifted physical standpoint, he might be the most gifted in this class.
Yeah,
His
he's a freak.
tape doesn't match the physical gifts that he has, but he could be a guy that jumps up the board. I think he could even be the third quarterback taken in this draft because somebody thinks, hey, can't teach that. We can teach him the other stuff. Um, and I would say the other two guys, I really like Carson Beck, and I also like Garrett Nussmeier. I think both those guys are really solid college quarterbacks. I don't know what they bring that makes them an NFL starter. And I'm not saying they don't have it because there's so much I like about their games, but I can't wait to see those guys at the NFL level and see if there's something about both of them, one of them, that gives them kind of that it or that difference making thing about them. I think they'll both be in the league for a long time. I both think they'll both be really good backups for a long time, but they intrigue me enough to go, do they have that something that I couldn't see on film that makes them an everyday starter in the NFL?
Yeah. For the Barnstormer faithful, favorite Barnstormer moment?
Favorite Barnstormer moment. That's a good one. Wow. I hadn't thought about this in a long time. Wow, that's a great one. Again, there was so many fun moments. The problem is that I can't say that I ever won a championship. I lost 2 championships, so I don't have that moment. But I would just say it was, I think, the first year that we had a team that I struggled kind of early getting acclimated to the speed and what have you. But in our first year, we got all the way to the semifinals, and just missed out, on going to the finals. And I just think, just that moment, being able to play in the playoffs and have the success that we did early on was probably the highlight for me since I wasn't able to win one. But there were so many fun, I mean, like you say, fun moments. Like to me, it was, standing in our in our little box and eating people's popcorn and having people throw beer on you. Like, because we were so close to the fans, like that was what arena football was all about. Even more than the football was just the environment and people yelling and screaming at you. And like I said, throwing beer on you and giving you high fives was just, that environment was just incredible.
And then we touched on your son getting ready. 42 of 43 in his pro day. Played a lot of football, started a
You know?
lot of games. Why should somebody take a shot on him?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with EJ is he just knows how to play. I mean, coming out with this class, if we're looking at guys that played their careers at the FBS level, I mean, he's number one in pass yards. He's number one in 400-yard games and sack avoidance. I mean, it's like he's done so many things really, really well. He's only 6 foot. He doesn't have a cannon arm. So those are the questions that he's going to have to answer at the next level. But I don't think anybody sees it and processes it as well as he does. I don't think anybody, when they can set their feet and throw, are as accurate as he is. And so I think he's earned the right to have an opportunity. What is he at the NFL level? I don't know. I don't know. Is he a career backup? Is he a guy that's good enough to make it? Is he a guy that could ultimately be like a Brock Purdy type player? Because I think that's kind of his mold. A great anticipation, great understanding, can make different kinds of throws. I don't know. And so that's kind of the beautiful thing. Like when I got my shot, nobody had any idea. Nobody knew what I was going to be at the NFL level, and I had to prove it. And I think a lot of guys in this class are going to have to do the same thing. Good college quarterbacks that have earned the right to compete, and now they're going to have to earn the right to show, hey, I either belong or I belong as a starter. And EJ falls into that mold, but I just don't think you throw for 10,000 yards and do the things that he did at that level without being a really, really good quarterback. And so, we're just sitting back hoping that somebody sees something in him like they did with Dad, and he gets an opportunity. And then from there, you got to take the ball in his hands and he's got to prove it.
That's right. He certainly got the blueprint. He certainly got Dad's
Yeah,
blueprint.
he understands the game. He sees it. All that stuff he's got that. Now it comes down to, do you have the flat out physical ability to compete at that level? And I can't wait to see.
Yeah, absolutely. He's played a lot of ball. So there's that.
Yes,
A lot of
yes,
ball.
a lot.
Last one for me, Kurt. This has been
Okay.
unbelievable. But just what's your why? Whether it was when you were playing or now in your career or with your family. Why do you do what you do? What's the purpose for you in life? What was it when you were playing? What is it now?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I think, for me, two standpoints. I mean, we could look at it from a faith standpoint and just believe God's got a purpose for me. But I think encompassing the faith and everything else is that I just want to have an impact. I want to have an impact on people around me, the world around me, whether that's my marriage, my family, my friends, my careers, playing football, whether it's, in regards to my faith. Like, I just want to have impact. And I want to do it however I can. So whether that's through the game of football, whether that's through what I did, whether that's through the next endeavor that I have, that's why. I created my own, coaching and teaching website. Why? Because I want to impact the next generation of quarterbacks and coaches. And why do I do this stuff on YouTube? Why do I continue to cover the game? I mean, it's just, to me, that's what it's about. It's how do I have an impact on the people around me in whatever capacity that is. It's why I wake up in the morning. It's why I thrive to be the best version of myself in every facet, because I know we're all in a position of leadership, and maybe me a little bit more than others because of my platform. Now, how do I use that to positively impact the lives of other people? That's always my goal.
Got to be a good practice player.
Yes, that too. Always, always.
I think we could sit here and talk. We talked about a Super Bowl. You went to 3. We didn't even get to 2, but we appreciate your time. I mean, this has been absolutely incredible just to hear your story and all the patience and resiliency and just having that level of conviction to carry it out and ultimately become, a Hall of Famer, two-time MVP, Super Bowl champion. So we appreciate your time and loved having you on.
You got it. My pleasure. And hopefully we'll do it again. Anything
Yes.
I can do to help you guys with your endeavors and what you're doing, you know how to reach me.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you, Kurt. You're the man. We'll definitely have you back on.